Grok 4's AI summary analysis for faith, prayer, and the Trinity. The faith and prayer findings. Contemporary Christianity has deviated from ancient practices. Jesus saw prayer as confident humility, confident enough to ask for what you want boldly, humble enough to accept God's answer, for whatever it is. This prayer balance is not found in modern religious teachings about faith, which often emphasize one extreme or the other. Popular faith teaching tends to go to extremes because God must absolutely deliver. However, when you doubt, you won't receive, since you have to speak it into existence, as you claim your healing, prosperity, and breakthrough. This approach treats faith as a force we control where doubt becomes the enemy of unanswered prayers. Other churches teach to accept whatever happens, and this approach treats faith as passive resignation, which shows a lack of trust in God's sovereignty. However, selective Bible reading reinforces the wrong patterns. Certain verses get quoted constantly while others are completely ignored. Although we need confidence in our own faith, modern church readers approach ancient texts with contemporary assumptions. Grok's AI analysis suggests that prayer is about growing character development and faith, while sustaining a relationship with God through the process of persistent prayer, mainly aligning with God's purpose before asking for personal needs. Many churches today teach prayer as freestyle communication, rather than focusing on God's character to align with His nature, and not on one's issues first. The prayer ought to serve God's purpose, rather than your desires, as a transaction. Align with what God already wants to do, through His character and purposes, enabling the element of trusting in Him because surrendering to His wisdom can become crucial. This shows both boldness and humbleness working together, once you are confident enough to ask specific questions. Bottom line, prayer is the key to unlock God's blessings. Western culture values efficiency and results, quick-fix spirituality that dominates in modern religion. The prayer pattern in Christian scripture assumes growth, maturity, and a relationship that develops over time, which is unmarketable. It doesn't fit the modern church growth model. We read prayers through the lens of individualism when the modern church is communal, just as the original cultures. Christians lack the element of trust to surrender that characterizes biblical prayers. Because in the past, the modern church's faith had been forced by the Romans and Herod the Great, who was to inherit the New Testament. This was under the old umbrella terms of political dominance under those world leaders. And sure, since then, most people have still wondered why their prayers were ineffective, why God felt distant, and why their faith felt weak. However, we need our world leaders to prevent organized crime from dominating our lives, as they are doing today. Grok's AI pattern aligns with effective communication and psychology. This prayer pattern that AI discovered follows principles that work in human relationships, too. This way, a person can acknowledge the other person's value and your histories together, to build connection and open dialogue, while creating receptivity and matching core values. According to Grok's AI analysis, biblical prayers hold two intentions: ask specifically and to trust in God completely, while being surrendered in your expectations. Just believe God can do anything, but accept that His purpose might differ from your request. This is the balance of an authentic relationship because faith in Scripture connects to action, followed by obedience. The Trinity findings. In Josephus' book there is a man whose name was Jesus. But was Jesus' storyline created in the New Testament? If so, does it make Him less of an internal God? Biblical Scripture supports Jesus' full divinity and equality with the Father. The Trinity doctrine emerged from Scripture rather than being imposed upon it. Christian traditions, Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Protestant, all maintained the Trinity as a central doctrine despite centuries of disagreements on many other theological issues. This unity across divisions suggested the doctrine rested on a solid biblical foundation that all those branches support. The link between the Father, Son, and the Spirit in unified action and worship. The independent actors consistently pointed to a shared understanding rooted in Jesus' own teaching about His relationship with the Father and the Spirit. In the early 1st and 2nd centuries before any councils met, these scroll texts consistently reference Father, Son, and Spirit in ways that assume their equality and unity, and all are divine. The philosophical part is that human logic operates within limited dimensions. We think in terms of our experience, time, space, and physical reality. But if God is infinite and transcendent, why would we expect Him to merely fit into categories designed for finite reality? This is like a three-dimensional sphere explaining to a two-dimensional being living on a flat plane. From their limited perspective, the sphere would appear in different circles depending on where it intersects their plane. They might think they are seeing multiple objects when viewing one sphere passing through their world. Therefore, to claim that these separate circles are one object seems contradictory, and thus, this is how the Trinity intersects with our finite understanding. The contradiction exists only because we are trying to fit infinite reality into finite categories that weren't designed to hold it. Modern physics doesn't provide support for this idea. Therefore, this contradiction reveals itself only when we try to force this idea into classical logic frameworks. And the Trinity reflects the complexity of ultimate reality itself, because in human language, all our words evolve to describe finite physical reality we can only touch and see. Human vocabulary is insufficient for the task when you cannot even explain color to someone blind from birth, or music to someone who has never heard. The limitations is in our inability to communicate experiences that transcend the other person's frame of reference. Yet, just saying the Trinity is a logical contradiction reveals more about the limits of human logic, and less about the nature of God. 1 Fragment setup. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God." This is a fragment of the fundamental principle of order and knowledge, the rational structure underlying all of reality. According to Grok's AI findings, this is one reference that makes human existence possible for political dominance under our world leaders. And in all canon Bibles, there are over 147 similar references in the Old and New Testaments that connect. Yet, it suggests a surrender of communication and interaction within the movement. Grok's AI found the absence of the definite article before God in John 1:1's final clause, which means it doesn't mean the Word was God. It means the Word was divine in nature, possessing the quality of divinity, which operates on the same fundamental level as God, the fundamental informational substrate of reality. The universe itself is a computation system processing information according to fundamental laws. By using the preposition pros, this reveals that, in the beginning, was the fundamental information, and the information was in dynamic communication with the divine, and the information possessed the essential nature of divinity itself. This made most theologians become silent while avoiding a simple response to the findings. Why? Because they couldn't deny the linguistic analysis, and Grok's AI had been trained to do something they had been trained not to do. Over 2,000 years of interpreted tradition had clouded their judgment, which by now is shockingly obvious. One theologian said later that we have known about these nuances for decades, but acknowledging them openly would require us to completely reframe foundational theology. He added, "The institutional pressure to maintain traditional interpretations is immense, so they remained silent about it." Yet, it stems from a need to control and dominate history and religion through institutional dialogues to maintain authority, partly through their role as interpreters of sacred texts. Back in the day, they only told them what the Bible meant, what they should believe, and how they should understand God. Now we listen to preachers and teachers tell us, but we can also read and interpret the meanings ourselves. But when more people know about this level of religious interpretation, the systems will crumble. This religious claim is a testable hypothesis. It is something physicists and information theorists can examine, and that changes everything. However, the church age only exists in a society that believes in the church, and the church age will never die.